welcome to CEC Gurukul lecture. In the series on sociological research method, in today's lecture, we're going to discuss on feminist methodology. Now, to kind of repeat in every lecture, we refer to one particular reading, and these readings are taken from the syllabus of BA Honours Sociology, which is a part of NEP syllabus. So, it is taught across universities and colleges. So, let us try to understand the reading of Martin Hamelsay, which is a 1992 published article titled On Feminist Methodology. This is a provocative critique of feminist approaches to research, challenging the epistemological and methodological foundations. Feminist scholars have argued that gender is a fundamental axis of social life. And if we go back to the emergence of feminist studies, we kind of understand that much of the feminist scholars' methodology, sociology of gender studies emerged as a critique to the mainstream social science approach, where there was a kind of neglect on understanding gender. Much of the research in sociology or other social sciences were from a male perspective. So, this understanding to kind of make gender as the central category for understanding social life comes from an understanding that conventional social sciences often reflected male experience as universal, marginalizing women's perspective. So, in this lecture, we will assess arguments supporting the claim of a distinctively feminist methodology. So, when we read the article, we try to come at an understanding that is there a need for a separate feminist methodology, or is it something which is there already and there is a need to kind of look at the feminist methodology from a different perspective. So, Hamelsay sketches out 4 themes commonly found in discussion of feminist methodology that are widely considered to mark its distinctiveness. First, ubiquity of gender in social analysis. Feminist scholars argue that gender is a fundamental axis of social life. So, that implies that if you have to understand any social institution, you need to understand it from a gender perspective. And as I already said, this understanding comes from a conventional assumption or understanding that much of the social sciences neglected the understanding of gender. The second theme that has been explored in this article is experience versus method. This is personal experience versus scientific method. So, feminist methodology often privilege personal experience, especially women lived reality over traditional scientific method. So, again something that differentiated feminist methodology from other social science methodology was the understanding that we feminists were doing a lot of qualitative study in terms of understanding the lived experience from the perspective of the respondent, of the community that were studying, and therefore there was this dichotomy between the personal experiences versus a scientific method. This challenges the notion of objectivity, arguing that detachment is neither possible nor desirable. The third theme explored is rejection of hierarchy in research. Feminist research promotes reciprocal relation between researcher and subject. It critiques the hierarchical structure of conventional research, advocating for ethical and participatory method. So, again there was a kind of a challenge to the positivist scientific method of data collection, whereby the emphasis in feminist methodology is to build a kind of a rapport or a relation with the respondent or the community that you are studying, and that could be possible only when you have a egalitarian relation. So, there is no hierarchy between the researcher and the researched, and this kind of was coming in but with this whole idea of critiquing scientific conventional method. The fourth theme is emancipation as a research goal. So, feminist inquiry is often explicitly political, aiming to empower women and challenges oppressive structure. Validity is judged not just by methodological rigor but by transformative potential. This implies that when feminist methodology is used to kind of study a problem or an issue, the objective is not only to kind of construct knowledge around it, but also to kind of provide solutions to the problem. And much of the feminist study or gender study kind of emerges from the understanding that the gender inequality is universal and it is impacting women, it is impacting the gender relations in society on a negative side, that it is leading to violence, exploitation. So, when it becomes an emancipatory research, then it is also kind of ensuring that it creates a egalitarian relation or a violence free environment. So, when you will look into the themes, the author looks into each of these four themes in a kind of a more detailed discussion. And the first theme is the ubiquitous significance of gender and gender asymmetry. Gender is a structuring force. Feminist methodology posits that all human social relations are profoundly shaped by differences in the social position of women and men, particularly regarding power imbalance. The second way in which gender has been a central significant idea of feminist research is the pervasiveness of gender. Gender is considered a critical factor in all aspects of social life and must be incorporated into any analysis. Given historical male dominance, conventional social science is often viewed as primarily reflecting the experiences of men, which are then presented as universal human experience. These ideas led to specific directives for feminist research. And first was to explore women experience. So, this is basically trying to trace the genesis of feminist methods and feminist approach. So, how did they need a demand that there should be a feminist methodology? And this was kind of a critique of the social sciences or conventional way in which research was being done. So, they were kind of giving them, since only focusing in men and their considering men as representing society or the social order, the feminist researcher had this opportunity to explore women's experience to counter the male centric bias in conventional research. The second idea was to study gender differences and relations, to understand the power dynamics and social structures shaped by gender. The second common feature which is being explored in this article is the validity of experience against method. The methodology of feminist is to emphasize on the validity of personal experience, often in direct contrast to conventional scientific methods perceived as masculinist. Feminist literature often rejects conventional scientific method in favor of validating direct personal experience. So, the methodology that they apply is most of the time ethnography, qualitative, where the focus is to understand experience, emotions, and this is in complete contrast to the scientific method, which is more objective based, and also to the debate where which we did in the first lecture of this series. Is there a place for value? Can social science focus or sociology try to study values? And here we see feminist method where the entire objective is to capture the experience, to capture the everyday lived experience. The goal is to understand women's lives and experiences on their own term, generating theory grounded in the actual experiences and languages, rather than imposing preconceived notions of what is expected. women's experiences are treated as valid in themselves regardless of external validations. According to Stanley and Wise, if something is felt by a woman, it is considered real for her. So, it is kind of also critiquing the conventional understanding where social reality was in terms of the average or a majority of them experiencing it. Here, even it's an individual woman who is experiencing, it is kind of conceptualized as a valid experience to be explored and studied. So, the experience of women is seen as providing access to truth about the social world that are not available to men. Harding suggested that women's personal experience is a significant indicator of reality against which hypotheses are tested, arguing it's more complete and less distorting kind of social experience. So, it is actually what the respondent or the people whom we research are saying. It's kind of has no space for manipulation by the researcher themselves. So, as object of oppression, so the entire gender's feminist research began in terms of the exploitative relation between the men and women were visualized as objects of oppressions. So, they were compelled to understand the motives of their oppressor and intimately experience the impact of oppression. Margaret Mize argued that men lacking this direct experience may lack empathy and sociological imagination. According to Du Bois, women possessed a double consciousness, knowledge of the dominant male-centric culture and their own, often deviant perceptions and experience. So, the double consciousness is one of which is a male-centric violent and the other is in terms of their own experience. Most of the time their own experience is of a subordinate and of the oppressed. So, if these are kind of a constituting the experience where there is a lot of empathy in terms of understanding the social reality. So, these experiences are shaped by dominant cultural understanding, but also hold an awareness of their own distinct reality. So, there is no kind of a universal subordination or there is no kind of a universal way. Every women have their own experience in terms of their own distinct realities. So, the methodological consequences of a feminist approach is that only women can do feminist research. These ideas sometimes lead to the assertion that only women can truly understand women's experience and conduct research. Rejection kind of a idea that it is kind, since it's a woman who is studying a woman, she could capture more of the lived experience, but this can also kind of lead to some assumptions. It's not necessarily, but it kind of leads to a methodological consequence. The second methodological consequences is rejections of structured method. They often preference for unstructured or qualitative data collection and analysis method, as they are believed to offer better access to women's experience. So, there is no kind of a structured interview which is taken place. In much of the feminist methodology we have come across, there is a lot of conversation, there is a lot of dialogue between the researcher and the research, and there are no kind of a fixed interview schedule or interview questionnaire that the feminist researchers use. The third is critique of objectivity and neutrality. Structured method are also criticized for implying a neutral, uninvolved researcher and adherence to rules preserving objectivity. The third feature of feminist methodology, which the article kind discusses, is the rejection of hierarchical distinction between researcher and research, advocating for a reciprocal relationship. Feminist methodology emphasizes that the relationship between the researcher and the research should be reciprocal, breaking down traditional hierarchical structure. Anne Oakley, in an article published in 1980, criticizes conventional interviewing norm that prevent researcher from sharing personal experience or offering aid to interview. Rian Haas, in an article published in 1983, stresses the importance of authentic relation in research, meaning genuine connection experienced by both parties as the source of valid information. This led some feminists to advocate for the active and equal participation of both the researcher and the researched. Reinhardt suggests research subjects should participate in data analysis to ensure the findings are meaningful for them, not just the researcher. So, in a conventional research, it is the the researcher who collects data also does the analysis. Now, this is a kind of analysis is also interpreting the lived reality. So, it is from the perception of the researcher. The suggestion is that it should be interpreted, the analysis should be done by the subject who are sharing their lived experiences to show that the data is more authentic. The support for non-hierarchical approach, Stanley and Wise argue for making reasoning procedure which underline the knowledge produced out of research is transparent. They evenly imply that research should or cannot but focus entirely on the experience of the researcher. So, when we look into a non-hierarchical approach in feminist methodology, there are three main arguments in support of this. First is ethical. It is seen as ethically imperative that only non-hierarchical relationships are legitimate among women, extending the principle to feminist research involving women. The second is methodological. It is believed that truth can only be discovered through authentic relation and that hierarchical relationship lead to data distortion. So, if there is a hierarchy and the researcher kind of plays the power, then why should the respondent give you true data? So, in an egalitarian relation only we can understand the lived experience of the respondent or the community that is being studied. The third support for non-hierarchical approach is practical or consciousness raising. For research to be effective in consciousness raising an emancipatory function, it may be necessary to involve the researcher in the research process. These three arguments collectively push for a research practice that is not only ethically sound but also produces more accurate and transformative knowledge. The fourth key feature of feminist methodology is emancipatory goal, prioritizing the liberation of women over the mere production of valid knowledge for its own sake. Harding, in an article published in 1987, states, "It is only through struggles that one can come to understand oneself and social world." Mize, in an article published in 1983, echoes this by quoting Mao's dictum, "In order to understand a thing, one has to change it." This implies that knowledge is not passively acquired but actively constructed through engagement with and efforts to transform reality. Mize takes this further, arguing that the truth of a theory is not determined by its adherence to methodological rule. It is rather determined by its potential to orient the processes of praxis towards progressive emancipation and humanization. This means a theory's value is accessed by effectiveness in contributing to liberation. From this perspective, feminist research is inherently a process of conscientization, that is, consciousness raising, for both the researcher and the researched. Its success is judged by its ability to foster this heightened awareness and understanding of oppression. Hammersley's paper offers a strong, direct, and well-reasoned critique of what he perceives as essentialist or overly prescriptive tendency within certain strands of feminist methodology. The strength are nuanced acknowledgement. He doesn't dismiss feminism overall importance to social science. He clearly states its valuable contribution before diving into his critique, which adds credibility to his argument. The second strength of Hamsley's article is identification of core themes. His systematic identification and analysis of four common themes provide a clear structure for his critique. The third strength is comparative analysis. By consistently comparing feminist methodology arguments to existing ideas in non-feminist qualitative, ethnographic and social science literature, he effectively demonstrates many of the supposed distinctive features are not in fact unique. The fourth strength is critique of essentialism and relativism. His strongest points are made against the danger of essentializing women's experience or promoting a radical relativism. His parallels to problematic claims of privileged insight from other groups like Marxist, Nazi scientists are provocative and effectively highlights the danger of such positions. The fifth strength is Hammersley's articles call for an intellectual openness. His ultimate argument against separate methodological paradigm and for continuous open debate within social science is a powerful plea for intellectual rigor and against balkanization. Along with the strength of this article, there are certain limitations or potential counter argument. And the first is underestimation of the why. While Hammersley effectively shows what certain feminist ideas are not unique, he might be seen as downplaying why feminists might still emphasize them. Even if ideas like reflexivity or value experience exist elsewhere, the intensity and systematic application of these ideas specifically to address patriarchal bias might be seen as feminist distinctiveness. The second limitation is its distinctive approach versus distinctive methodology. Some feminists argue that it's more about a distinctive feminist approach to inquiry, a set of guiding principle and a political lens, rather than a fixed methodology in the narrow sense. Hammersley's critique often focuses on the latter, perhaps missing the broader intent. The third limitation, the power of political motivation. Hammersley views the strong inferential link between political and philosophical assumptions and research decisions as problematic. However, for many feminists, like this link is precisely the point that research should be explicitly political and driven by emancipatory goals, and that pretending otherwise is simply perpetuating a masculinist status quo. His call for pragmatism might be seen as a retreat from the politically charged commitment. The fourth limitation, simplistic notion of practice. While his critique of the oppressor and the oppressed dichotomy is well taken and aligns with intersectional feminist thought, some might argue that the call for reconceptualization is precisely what feminist scholars are already doing in this area, suggesting his critique is aimed at an outdated or overtly simplistic version of feminist emancipatory goals. So, when we kind of come to the conclusion, Hammersley's article, Feminist Methodology, is a significant contribution to the meta-theoretical debate in social science. It serves as a valuable cautionary tale against intellectual insularity and dogmatism, urging researchers to engage critically with all ideas regardless of their origin. Transparent inquiry over politically convenient or ideological rigid methodological framework. It challenges feminists to reframe their methodological claim and to engage more deeply with established social science principles. So, when we read this article by Hammersley on feminist methodology, we not only understand what methodology it is, we also kind of start questioning whether it's unique or how it is different from the conventional social science methodology. With this, I come to an end of this lecture. Thank you.